Allow me, if you will, a second to play Mystic Meg. I'm gonna read your minds from within this screen. Picture an open world game, right? Picture an open world game that you've played recently. Just pluck one out of your head. Okay, I can see it in my mind's eye. Okay, it's coming through. Oh, okay, your protagonist is unfamiliar with the land of your game. It's got combat, it's got upgradable gear, it's got RPG style point spending, it's got stealth elements. I'm seeing scattered collectibles, I'm seeing crafting mechanics, I'm seeing catching animals in the world to get materials for that crafting. I'm seeing climbing up high to scope out and unlock more of the map. Am I hitting a few notes here? Am I ticking a few boxes? Whether the game you thought of was, I don't know, Assassin's Creed, Horizon Zero Dawn, Shadow of Mordor, Skyrim, Witcher 3, Borderlands, Red Dead Redemption 2, GTA 5, Zelda Breath of the Wild, Minecraft, Cyberpunk 2077, Spider-Man, Fallout, Watch Dogs, Death Stranding, Days Gone, Valheim, Ghost of Tsushima, Dragon Age, Saints Row, etc., etc. There are lots of open world games out there, and a lot of them are very similar. My name is JTurn, you can call me Jake, everybody does, and this is a kind of like deep divey kind of channel, right? If this is your first time here. If you're a returning friend, hi, how are you? If you're here for the Sunday night premiere, give me a little wave emoji, I'll be in the chat. But I should specify, as I do with a lot of these videos, you know more than me, okay? I'm not a gaming expert. I've just done the research and I've put it together into this video. Expert I am not. I barely know what I'm doing here. What are you doing here? If I were you, I wouldn't plan on asking so many questions if you weren't going to answer any. So what is open world fatigue? Well, open world fatigue, or sandbox fatigue in a nutshell, is the phenomenon of gamers becoming really bored with games that they would otherwise really like. Specifically, the kind of open world game that is becoming more and more common these days. It's not an official term, right? But it's something that I've experienced a lot myself and read about a lot online, and I find that a lot of other gamers are also feeling similar things.
I remember a time when an open world was novel and exciting. Today, open worlds are the default. And with good reason, I'm not all against open world design. However, we traded in some things when we decided that an open world was more important than everything else. I'm beginning to notice a craving for tighter narrative-driven experiences that, if they're being made, are totally flying under the radar for me. I don't want gaming to go back exclusively to that or anything, but I would, at least occasionally, love to get a well-written story in which I am guided along a more narrow path than open world typically provides. The last game I played that was like what I'm looking for was The Last of Us. My buddy and I swapped consoles. I used to have an Xbox One in addition to the PC for about a month so that we could play the other platforms' exclusives. I realised The Last of Us is a narrative gem. I'm not expecting recommendations galore to rival that one, it just illustrates my point quite well. Sometimes I would like to be guided more tightly along an experience.
For me, this isn't necessarily something that creeps up on me noticeably. It'll be when I get off the console, right, that I realise like, I don't really care enough to go back and play that. If you've felt this before from big games, then you're probably sitting there going like, yes, yes, or maybe you've never felt it before and you're sat there being like, what are you talking about? Just play the game. But over the years, I've sort of narrowed down, for me personally, what it is that causes this open world fatigue, and also how I can either prevent it or power through it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to talk about the causes of open world fatigue, then we're going to move on to my solutions. Now, they might not work for everyone, but they're what work for me, so they're what I would suggest trying. Before we get in on it, I should say, like, I love open worlds, right? This is coming from a place of love. I'm not saying that any of these games are I'm not saying any of these games have big problems. Some of them do, but I still love them regardless. But this is, you know, a problem I often face, and I think other people might too. Please do remember that you can help a growing boys channel by giving me the old like and comment. YouTube loves seeing that double whammy. If you can't think of anything to comment, today, why don't you leave me a little boot emoji in the comments? A little boot. We're going to give this algorithm a right kick up the arse. I also have a £1 Patreon if you fancy supporting a growing boy and his growing channel and, you know, Sentence end. But before you get fatigued with me talking YouTube stuff, let's dive in, shall we? Here we go. Game publishers are money makers first. Sure, we can believe that developers go into this with like some passion for what it is they're making and stuff, but the game publishers are first and foremost money makers. You know, they have a stock number, they have a board, they need to keep a lot of people happy. And a way to do that is, of course, certainty. They're going to do all they can to make sure what they're producing will make money. And one of the chief ways of doing that these days is to make what everyone else is making that is successful. As I highlighted at the beginning of this video in my incredibly funny bit, we are spending hundreds and hundreds of hours playing the same game with a different hat on it. Do you know what I mean? We are spending hundreds of hours playing the same game presented to us in a different aesthetic. And that's not always bad, right? Like, I loved Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I tell anyone who will listen to play Horizon Zero Dawn, put a pin in that. I'm almost certain that that repetition, that replaying of all the same elements, of all the same concepts, can definitely contribute to open world fatigue. But we keep buying these games, they keep being successful. I think I counted on the Wikipedia page, I think 12 of the top 50 best-selling games of all time are open world or have open world elements, right? And a lot of the games on that list are just like f***ing Wii Sports and Wii Play, because every casual in the world bought the Wii, right? Because every household in the world owned Wii Sports and Wii Play, but that doesn't mean they played them. So I think that's a pretty sizable chunk. And these games, even if they are the same over and over again, continue to be very successful. So I think we have to buckle up and realize that this repetition of these game mechanics is going to carry on for a very long time. So yeah, buckle up. We've got to get used to repetition and how to not get fatigued if we want to spend hundreds of more hours in blockbuster games. And speaking of hundreds of hours, a lot of gamers these days expect their new releases to be at least 60 to 100 hours of gameplay, right? They want like 100 hours for their investment or the game's not worth it. And the thing is, a lot of these games that say they have 60 to 100 hours of playtime, like, you know that's not core gameplay, that's padding, right? Like, it's side quests, it's crafting, it's collecting, it's grinding. I once tweeted, I think this might have been about The Last of Us 2, that even games that are near perfect to me, in my opinion, could be made better by being shorter. And I got some real kickback for that, right? I got some people saying that like, oh, I don't want to play a movie, I want to play a game. Like, my favorite game is, I've spent like 200 hours in it. And I get, this is just different experiences, right? I don't think just having more means all of that stuff is good. I can tell you with almost certainty that the games that stick with me, the games that I think about after years and years, are ones that have been shorter overall. I think of Portal, I think of Last of Us 2, I think of BioShock. They're not ones that you spend hundreds of hours in grinding side quests. That doesn't stay with me as an experience. I don't find nearly as much value in that. But yeah, I got a lot of pushback for that, for saying that making games shorter could often make them better. I didn't think that was going to be a controversial opinion. Grinding, like, if you love grinding and you think that that makes a game more fun, then all glory to you. Like, you know, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but I just would rather have something that engages me actively rather than expects me to do more work. When I'm deciding how much fun I'm having in a game, I need to weigh up my time investment in that. And if 90% of the time I spend on it is just wandering around doing busy work or repetitive grinding, I don't find that as valuable. I don't find that a valuable trade for my time. You're asking me to spend dozens of hours doing the same thing I've already done in 5 other games this year just because you made this one. No. Even for me, even just the knowing that I have so many hours of the game ahead of me when I've already put so much into it is like quite a big trigger for open world fatigue, right? Being in the midst of a game and knowing that, like, to get to this quest, you have to finish these 3 fetch quests, and each of them are their own fetch quest, and you have to work your way up this tree is quite a common quest structure, right? I just hit that kind of thing sometimes, and I think, God, I have so much more busy work to do before this game will let me play the story. And then what happens once I've been doing all this busy work is the story just doesn't engage me anymore. And speaking of engagement, I'm so good at these segues, God. By its very nature, a lot of content in open world games has to be accessible to us whenever we want it. We need to be able to go to any area of the map and have the freedom to do whatever we want. You get games that might add some element of control to this system, like the area levels in Assassin's Creed, or you'll have games that are like the epitome of this, like Skyrim, where you can literally go anywhere and do anything at any point. But generally, I think open worlds do this. They make sure that content is generic enough to be accessed at any time. And I think that's kind of a trap. I think that, especially for Skyrim on the internet at least, there's been a lot of the phrase, wide as an ocean, deep as a puddle, thrown around, and I think that's quite apt. As the Dragonborn, when the Greybeards call you, you are free to just go and pick flowers on a mountain if you want, for as long as you want. You could never mention them at all. Alduin's supposed to eat the whole world, but he won't. You could spend hundreds of hours in that game and he won't. In Fallout, when your partner is killed and your child is kidnapped, you can just go out into the nearest village and start playing Palate renovations if you want, for as long as you want. Doesn't matter. It has no effect on the story. Ciri is never going to get captured. Zelda is never going to stop being able to hold back Ganon. It has to be like this to give you the freedom to explore the open world. And that's fine, right? Like, that's not inherently bad. Sometimes they're good ways of making sure that we're in the illusion, right, that there is a reason to press ahead while also being, not so much that we feel free enough to enjoy the world. Does that make sense? That was kind of a muddy sentence, but I just think that makes the story, less good. Freedom from tension, or freedom from, the consequences of tension, makes poorer narrative. Tension or conflict is essential to good narratives and good stories, right? It drives progress. It keeps us, emotionally invested in what's happening on the screen. But the longer I spend in an open world, the less engaged I am in the story. The less my experience becomes about the story and the characters. Even if you do get to the point where you've finished the main story of the game, if you keep playing it, the main story of the game, the main, which I would argue is the main artistic package, right, becomes less and less and less of your total experience with the game. If the story takes 10 hours and you spend 60 hours in it, it's less of the experience. And again, these things aren't inherently bad, they're just things. They're just facts. Like I said, I love open world games. I just think that a lot of fatigue can come from not feeling engaged with the game you're playing. And one of the most effective ways to keep me engaged with the game I'm playing is characters, story. If there's no danger, tension, conflict or anything to keep me emotionally invested in what I'm doing, then why am I doing it? It's just busy work at that point. To some extent, it breaks the immersion of the world. When I lose that immersion that story is so good at providing, then the game just becomes a collection of mechanics. I don't feel the same depth of connection to it, which I think is what feeds into that pointlessness part of the fatigue feeling that I mentioned before. Part of open world fatigue being that you're just walking around ticking boxes. There's not really an experience happening. Speaking of depth, ticking boxes, you can write that segue yourself. I can't think of a good one for this. Joe Blogg's side quest that lives in an open world might have a really beautifully written couple of lines of dialogue. They might be beautifully performed, but once he's done with them, he's just a tree with a face on it, right? Once the tape recorder between his ears has played out all of the information that you need to get his box ticked, and then he's given you his meager little reward, he's empty. He's finished. An open world with a billion side missions and a billion characters to give them to you doesn't mean the world is full and vibrant. If anything, it might even show more of how the sausage is made, right? I don't think it's inaccurate to draw a line between the 2 points of more and more games becoming huge open world, hundreds of hours experiences, and more games being released as buggy messes, right? There's just so much that they have to do and get done in order to give us these open worlds that it just can't all be as good as a game that is maybe a third of the size made in the same amount of time. It's just not practical. In my research for this video, right, I found a Reddit comment that described this as the difference between going to a buffet and having a chef-prepared meal. And of course that doesn't apply in all cases, right, but I just think it's a really good analogy. Sure, the food in that buffet might be fantastic, and you've got all kinds of different cuisines from all over the world, all kinds of different elements that you all love individually on their own. But is it ever going to stay with you in a way that a single dish that 5 people spent hours on might? Do you know what I mean? Not every metaphor is perfect, whatever. I'm sure people are gonna pick that apart in the comments. It just resounded with me. Just by practicality alone, right? Less often ends up feeling like more. And in my mind here, right, the adjacent comparison that instantly drew for me was Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is a bloated corpse of a game, right? And The Last of Us 2, which is probably the most recent game I've played that just like really jabbed me, really got its hooks in, right? The Last of Us 2 isn't open world. I think it has one small open world section, right? But largely it's just a series of on-rails maps that you make your way through to progress the story. And those maps are incredibly detailed. Going through different people's apartments, you feel their different personalities. Going into like, I don't know, a shop, there'll be a post-it note on the wall of the salon that you can read before you head next door to a completely different shop that is like, I don't know, a mechanic. And like, it's just so much more detailed, fleshed out. It feels lived, it feels real, and there's an incredible immersion there. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you can go one village over and you'll find the same house, right? Like, it's got the same furniture in it, it's got the same exterior. Like, I know that you could probably just be like, oh, it's because it was old times, there was less variety or whatever, but you know what I mean, don't you? You know that because the world is infinite and open, some of these things had to be made procedurally using the same assets. It's just not as crafted. The story characters in Last of Us 2, you spend more time with them, you get to know them more, how they relate to your player character. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I don't even remember their names. Do you know this guy's name? Do you know this guy's name? Because they were pretty big in the main story. I couldn't tell you what their names are. Which is, you know, that's a lie, because I had to, whilst editing this video, download their pictures. So I know who they are now. But at the time of making this video, I was just gesturing wildly. For me, those are the big things that cause open world fatigue for me, right? At least the things that I've kind of spotted, narrowed it down to, the kind of things that I think cause it. Again, I'm not an expert, you know more than me. Other things might cause it for you, some of the things I've mentioned might not bother you. And like I said, you know, these features aren't always a problem. It's not always a problem if a game is super long, because if I'm having fun in it, then cool, I get to play more of it. It's not always a problem that individual NPC interaction is shallow, because I have a variety of gameplay to enjoy. But do they help cause open world fatigue for me? Yes. Yes, they do. So then let's move on to the ways in which I solve this problem. These are the ways that I get over or get through my open world fatigue. Okay, let's get cracking. I know this is going to sound like heresy from a gamer, right? But we have to make sure that we spend time away from gaming, okay? I'm terrible at this, but we all need to make sure that we build in time for our brains to be unstimulated and for our thoughts to be thought, for our thoughts to think, okay? God knows I'm terrible at this. Like, while I'm editing a video, I might have a podcast in while I'm also playing a game of Hearthstone, and like, I'm like, oh, I'm chilling out. That's not chilling out, right? We need to have time where nothing is going in, it just gets to think. There's no way that after a few days of 10-hour sessions on a game, you're not going to feel burnt out, whether you love the game or not. You can cleanse your palate by taking some time away from those kind of open world games and playing things that are a lot more like shorter and more direct. Need some recommendations? Why don't you go and play Uncharted? Or maybe Batman Arkham Asylum, or you could play the Portal games, or, you know, the BioShock collection. That's a good one. What all of these games have in common is that there is a clear path of progression. You're feeling like you're making progress as you play it. And I think that that kind of it flicks something in your brain to know that you're getting real progression, right? Rather than just ticking boxes. At least for me anyway. Or maybe you could play some games that are exclusively about story rather than all the busy work, right? Some recommendations for me on that would be like The Wolf Among Us, Until Dawn, Detroit Become Human, right? These games are all very, very much story focused. So you're having an experience that you can, I think, be more immersed in. You can, this is one that this is one that actually kind of totally changed my experience with games, right? And you can, I believe in you, choose to relinear the sandbox game you're playing, okay? I did this for Horizon Zero Dawn, right? I got to a point where I realized this open world fatigue was happening, and I thought to myself, I'm gonna be bored of this soon. And I was absolutely loving that game. I was loving it so much. And thinking to myself, I'm going to be bored of this soon, I realized that I had a limited amount of hours left that I was going to put into this game. And I thought to myself, when I'm not playing this game anymore, how do I want to have spent those hours? Finishing side quests just in case there's something that I might not have wanted to miss? Or would I like to have experienced the whole story? Do I want to make sure that every Dead-Eyes Joe blog has found his cat or whatever? Or do I want to know where Aloy went, what she did? And in the end, it was just like the best decision I'd ever made. And it improved that game massively, I have to say. Once I just narrowed down my focus and I was like, right, I'm only doing story missions. I'm focusing solely on getting through the main story of this game. The story became tighter, it became better, I became more invested, it became more rewarding. Also, there was plenty of materials placed along the path of all these quest missions for me to be able to finish them, okay? I didn't need to go hunting and gathering, that was an illusion. And since then, I found that with nearly all sandbox games that I've played, right? There will be enough health pouches, there will be enough ammunition, there will be enough crafting materials. If you're starting to feel like you're flagging and you're story orientated like me, then just focus on the main story, because I promise you, every sandbox game, every open world game I've ever played, it got significantly better once I focused on the main mission and started ignoring all of the other shit that it was giving me to do, because all of that was just time wasting. Yeah, I had fun with it a bit, you know, I would craft here, I'd do some raids here in games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but once I focused on the main story, I just became so much more invested in it. And yeah, like, I know that you might get FOMO from the side missions or whatever for special weapons or for, you know, special materials or whatever, but all of that is there to make you think that, to make you think you have to do it, okay? If you know there's only a certain amount of hours left that you're gonna put into this game, in my opinion, there is a bigger reward for those hours by putting them into the main story, right? There are story writers that wrote a good story in this game that has been cut to bits and spread out across 90 hours of nothing. Putting all those pieces back together side by side makes a lot of game stories much more engaging. So that's that. I've cured sandbox fatigue. I solved it. That's what it is. That's how you fix it. You're welcome. Money, please. It's worked so far since, I guess, 2017 when Horizon Zero Dawn came out, and I realized how much better sandbox games can be if you just railroad them, right? Like if you just sort of narrow everything down. If you like this video, it would be really awesome to give me a like and a comment. Like I said, YouTube loves that double whammy and seeing that you really like the video, and it would really help me out as a growing channel. And I've got my £1 Patreon down in the link as well if you fancy supporting me. But if you have your own little tips and tricks that you use when you're starting to get bored of sandboxes, please do let me know. Or, you know, if you've never felt it before, or if there is a particular open world game that you think really made you feel this, please do tell me. If you don't know what to comment, then why don't you leave me a star so that I know that you've watched the video all the way through and you've spent all this time with me, because I like you. You're a star if you do that, hang around towards the end. I love it. But, you know, I'll have a sexy reading list down below, as always, for the kind of things that I read and watched in order to make this video. So have fun in your open worlds, guys, and I hope that you don't get fatigued. Okay, bye.